I'm going to call the meeting to order. Newmarket Town Council special meeting Wednesday. Can everyone hear me back there?
He's going.
Do you have the mic? Is that better? Okay. So I'm calling the meeting to order. Newmarket Town Council special meeting Wednesday, November 29th, 2006, 7 p.m. Council Chambers. The first item on the agenda is an informational meeting with the town auditor. At this point, I'll call up Paul Mercier. And I've asked Paul to come this evening to give us a brief history of his services with the town of Newmarket, also let us know about his credentials, and to go through briefly the auditing process for the town.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. This is actually the first time I've met with the town council here, and I think I've been auditing now for about 7 years. I have about 25 years experience. Used to be with a larger firm in the state, and for the last 10 years have been practicing by myself, basically. Have a few colleagues that help out in the back office, so to speak, but I try to work directly with clients personally, and so that the entire audit process is basically controlled. Instead of having inexperienced staff, I try to bring that experience to all aspects of the audit. An audit is basically nothing more than an independent opinion that on the correctness of your financial statements. And the financial statements consists of reports on all the various funds, projects, grants, all the financial activities of the year, basically. When we say in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, that's a form of a report that's somewhat different than the individual reports that you see in the town report from the tax collector, the town clerk, the treasurer, things like that. The financial statements pulls all of that together and uses a standardized basis of accounting, if you will, so that you can compare your financial statements to any other community, basically, in the country of similar size. If they're both prepared on using the same principles, then you can compare apples to apples. Otherwise, you may be comparing cash basis and accrual basis, and one showing just the timing of events, whereas another matches everything to that budget year. So when we talk about financial statements in a GAAP sense, we talk about accrual basis and really matching everything to that budget year that's applicable to that year. The opinion letter, the only part of this 50-some-odd page document really that belongs to the auditor is there's a couple of reports in the front. One is independent auditor's communication of reportable conditions and other matters. As part of the audit process, we look at the town's internal systems, the checks and balances, if you will. What checks and balances do we have in place that if something is incorrect, that it will be caught in the normal course of town operations. For example, we reconcile the bank accounts to the bank balances, and if it doesn't add up to what's in the general ledger, then that means we need to look farther. It means that the town finance department then takes that a step further, and so that's a check and balance. And there's those kinds of controls throughout the town to the extent that people that are collecting money are not accounting for that money. People that are responsible for authorizing transactions are not accounting for those, so that you have this check and balance, if you will, in a larger sense. Whereas at home we reconcile our own checkbooks, and if it's wrong, then nobody knows about it but us. In a business or in a larger sense, if the treasurer is separate, the treasurer is responsible for handling and for keeping that cash asset, if you will, and somebody else is responsible for accounting for that, and they compare notes at the end of the month, say, and if they agree, then that's a check and balance that those numbers that ultimately get into these financial statements are correct. Now, we don't do a detailed study of that system. From an audit standpoint, we look at those controls, and we make a judgment on the strength of those controls to the extent that if some things are stronger or weaker, we might spend more or less time. An audit can't look at every single transaction, or we'd be your finance department. So we use statistical analysis, and we sample transactions and in a sense, test these balances. We may verify some things 100% because it's a large activity like a contract or a grant or a project that's happening down the street where we're building a building or something, and there's just a few contracts or a few transactions, but yet it's a lot of money that's involved. So we might look at every single transaction and that added up to those numbers. Whereas in other cases, if we have 10,000 cars that we registered, well, we're not going to look at 10,000 motor vehicle permits. We'd still be here at the end of the year. And so we'll sample those kinds of things, or assessing records, or detailed transactional kinds of records. And based on all of that, we formulate the opinion on these financial statements, which is the other document here, which is ours. And we say that, in our opinion, these financial statements fairly represent the financial condition of the town and the results of operations. So the profit and loss and the balance sheet. It looks a little bit more detailed than that because of the fact that in a government, everything is separated by funds. So we have the general operating fund, we have individual funds for water departments and sewer departments and projects and things like that. And so that the way we lay out our reports is that we try to, in the back of the document, provide enough detail so that anybody reading this can get all the way back to those individual funds. And my approach to an audit basically is to work with the finance records so that if we find something that's wrong and we propose that the town make an adjustment, post those right to the books and records. So when the audit report is done, we should be able to go from these numbers straight into the detailed records that have the pennies, and see those numbers. So in a nutshell, that's the audit process. I'd be happy to answer any questions. This year's audit for 2006 is still in process. We began in July, and we were waiting for some information, so that hasn't been tied up yet, but we're hoping that that'll be tied up shortly. And we'll have this 2006 year for June 30, 2006 closed up.
I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
You do the audits for 13 other towns, correct? And is it the same audit process that you use for Newmarket that you use for the other municipalities?
Depending on the size of the community, we may adjust those, adjust our approach to the audit. But the audits are based on standards. There's auditing standards that were required by the profession to follow. And so, yeah, the approach is the same. The standards are the same for every audit.
Because are there different levels of audits or different types of audits?
Yes. Well, you could, well, an audit of the financial statements, okay, would be an audit of, as I just described. If you were interested in looking at something in more detail, then you could modify that audit. You could agree to other procedures, if you will. The standards would allow us to do that, would allow us to, we would call that an expanded scope audit. Or we might look at and it would really be more of a report or a review or a study than it would be an audit. An audit implies that we're attesting to something, so that if you hand me this document and say, or somebody says, can you independently tell us that this is correct? Then based on our knowledge and experience, we're attesting to the correctness of this document. Just like, if you ask me to say, is this black? I can attest to that based on my experience and knowing that that's the color black. And so, whereas if you wanted to study procedures, okay, you could get a range of recommendations based on, there's more than one way to do lots of things. And so that would be based on different theories, different whatever. You could do, there's more than one way to build a house. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to let the public know that there are copies of the last year's audit up here. If anybody would like to be looking through those, we can pass those around. We only have a couple of them, but if anybody wanted to see them. And you did mention the independent auditors.
Is that different than what's included in the annual?
It's the exact same thing that's in the annual report, and it's also on the website. So it's nothing new.
I was going to say that the town includes the entire audit in the annual report.
And on the website. You had mentioned about the independent auditor's report on financial presentation, which was your basic opinion about the finances. And I just wanted to highlight 2 paragraphs on the last audit that we received. In our opinion, the basic financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the town of Newmarket, New Hampshire, as of June 30th, 2005, and the results of its operations and the cash flow of its proprietary fund types and non-expendable trust funds of the year, then ended in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. I just wanted to state that opinion that you had at the last time that we did the audit. Are there any other counselors that have any questions? Counselor Glennon?
Yes, Paul, could you explain for, I believe, the public's purpose and for myself also, the difference between a fiscal year-end audit and what the petition is looking for as a detailed audit?
I saw a copy of the petition, and in my opinion, the petition is really looking to a managerial study. Are we doing things as efficiently or as best as we can, as opposed to an audit? An audit of the financial statements is that independent opinion on the correctness of those statements, whereas perhaps the expanded scope, bringing that into a managerial study, has more to do with procedures. And so I guess that would be
But that's basically
what I
what
would
the
see as the
difference is.
difference there, yeah.
But you also stated that when you're doing the year-end fiscal audit, that you're looking at certain things, and if they meet those standards. However, beyond the scope of that, there are other areas that can be looked at. However, I guess I'm not clear on what are some of the other things other than you use the scenario of auto, the registration of vehicles and things like that. What other areas could potentially be looked at? And I think this is
Well,
where,
how do we gather information? How do we document that information? Do we automate do we automate everything that we could be automating? You started some new procedures this year, or this past cycle, say, for example, of allowing residents to go online and register cars, okay? That brings along with it a whole new scenario of record keeping. Some of those things are automatic. At the same time, some of those things are not as tangible. So that, how do we make sure that we're getting all that information and that it's correct? And so that from an audit standpoint, we look to see that is there a system in place that allows us to account for the deposits that got into the bank. Can the town clerk take responsibility for the cars that got registered? Does she or he have the ability to verify that the deposit agrees with the registrations that were issued and those kinds of things? Because that's a new process and whatever, we've had some discussion on that. Those are the kinds of things that are really, they're outside the scope of a normal audit, but it's the kind of things that by having an auditor, by having an annual audit, Mel, or they say this finance department or the tax collector's department or the town administrator's office may be in contact with the auditors during the year for advice on those kinds of things.
Would you also, under your scope of a fiscal year-end audit, be looking at, say, documents such as a 1099, whether those are completed, whether they're filed, and whether there's receipts to go with those 1099s, and whether they're filed properly?
We look to the procedures of those, and yes, we may sample some of those. We don't necessarily look at every single one of those, because in your particular case, it's an automated process.
Okay, so when you say you look at them, do you look at them by requesting them, or do you look at what is presented and given to you? As part of the audit process, we request a list of, we request basically maybe 25 or 30 pages of information from various places, whether it's from the town clerk or the finance department or whatever. The 1099s are one of those items, and so that they would be given to us in a stack, if you will. You know, to the extent that we might test those, we would only know that is there information on file from the vendor and that sort of thing. So you don't necessarily go through every single one, because it could be quite a stack.
Sure, that's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, depending on the size of the community, there could be lots of them, or there could be a few, you know.
Okay. And that 1099 is actually filled out by whom?
1099 would be filled out here by the finance
By the
department.
finance department,
Yeah.
so the individuals do not fill those out.
The individuals that receive it?
Right. In other words, if I'm a contractor and that you hired me, I believe the
Right.
dollar amount is $600 within the calendar year, a 1099 is then issued?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
At that, and it's filled out by the finance department, but not by the individual?
That's right. And before, and what, from the standpoint of an internal control procedure, okay, we would encourage the community to have a procedure that makes sure that your requirement under the IRS regulation, the Internal Revenue Service would require you to have a W-9, which is a form on file that gives the finance department all the information that's necessary to issue that at the end of the year. And so that,
Thank you.
yeah.
Are there any other counselors that have a question? Counselor LaBranch?
Just a quick question. What would you say is generally your time frame from start to finish on an audit? Saying you've done 13 different communities, do you have a feel for what it generally takes to get one complete?
On this community here, I would say it's about a 2-week time frame, probably a week or a little bit more in the field looking at information, and another 3, 4, 5 days to pull the reports together in the office. Yeah. A lot of the procedures are, a lot of the reporting aspects of things are automated because we just try to be as efficient as we can. It's the only way that we can control costs. And so automation is one area where, like in this report, for example, there could be one number in a detailed report that gets added together and may ripple through some 50 or 60 numbers, okay, either by getting combined with other numbers and things like that. Well, from the standpoint that it's a mechanical process, we can use spreadsheet techniques and things like that to automate that, so that say the report is complete and I send a draft to the community, and something's not correct because it's in the wrong place or whatever. And so that we could change that number in a matter of seconds as opposed to having to add through that up. And so that some of those techniques save us time. In other cases, we're looking at records in the field. So like, for instance, if I can sample assessing records efficiently, if I don't have to go through 1,000 records with a random numbers selection, if there's a way to do that, if there's a way to automate that, well, I can get to that point very quickly, and then I can say to the assessing department, can you pull these cards for me? And then I can see the property cards compared to the records. And so I haven't wasted time. Whereas other audit firms might come in and they might put a staff person in the corner over there for 3 days, writing down numbers. I try not to do that because I just don't have the luxury of time.
Okay, maybe I missed something here, but you're telling me that generally 2, 3, 4 weeks, but you've been working on this particular audit this year since?
This audit's been sitting on the corner of my desk since July because I was waiting for information. That we didn't have all the trust fund information, we didn't have the library information. And so what happens, unfortunately, is it goes to the end of the line and it sits there because time goes on. And so that right now, here I am, everybody else is out Christmas shopping and I'm trying to manufacture time to finish your audit. It doesn't come cheap. It's not the least expensive rates under those circumstances. Whereas if we could have started and finished this course in July, you would have your reports. So I've always tried to have your reports back to the council by the end of September, because that was kind of your time frame. And then we were anticipating some changes in the finance department. We moved your audit up to July last year, and kept that same schedule this year because for the same reasons. And so, some of the elected officials just unfortunately don't coordinate well.
So just to follow up on that, Councilor Branch, I had the same exact question that you had. And as Paul said, that he used to come in September. He would come in September and all of our information would be ready. So he'd come, he'd spend a week here, he'd gather all the information that he needed, and then he would get the report done with that turnaround time that he just said it would take, about 2 or 3 weeks to turn it around. He was asked this year to start coming in July. This year to come in July. He came in July, spent a week here, but didn't have any of the information that he had. Knowing that he has 13 municipalities that he has to schedule to spend a week at all of those places, he then came back. He came here. If we would have had all of our information together, we would have had that audit by the end of August.
Sure.
Or the beginning of September. But because we didn't have all the information, we got on the back burner while he dealt with the other municipalities and his other clients. So, when I became aware of this and speaking with the new finance director, we are going to try for next year to get on your schedule for September when we can have all of our information together. And so there'll be a very short turnaround from the time when you come here to the time that we actually have our audit.
When we first started, what we did was we scheduled, I think, was the week before Labor Day, something like
Right.
that, or that time frame, or that week right after Labor Day, or whatever. And so that, and then we got in and out basically, and had that window of time planned, and so, I'm doing the best I can, but.
I just want the public to know that when I open up the public hearing, I'm going to invite people from the public to come up and ask their questions at that time. Right now, we're having a dialogue between the council. We're also going to be having the town clerk, tax collector come up, and also both finance directors.
One
Go
other
ahead,
quick
Councilor
question.
Branch.
Can I ask who requested you to start earlier this year as opposed to the normal September start?
I think it was probably finance department and the town administrator's office is usually who we coordinate with.
Thank you.
One other thing that I should mention is that the audit reports to the council. And so So we enter the organization, if you will, between management and the board. So that, and that's on purpose, if you will. And so that's why you notice that the reports are not addressed to the finance department or anybody else, they're addressed to the council. Yeah.
Counselor Glennon.
Paul, you stated the reasons to why this audit is late this year. The information in which you're waiting for, how substantial in depth and detail is that information? Because it's something that you could have done and moved on, or is it really detailed stuff? So, you know, I'm not assessing blame here, I just am curious to it, because I've been on this council now for 3.5 years, and I've never, ever seen a audit report come in the timeline such as the 1st of October. In fact, I had a conversation with you last year, and you explained to me what you were waiting for in the audit. So every year that I've been on this council, we don't usually get it until sometime around December.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an ongoing thing. So this is not something that's just happened once, so.
The information that we were waiting for on, had to do with cash balance, had to do with not cash balances, but investment balances at the, and the trustees' reports. And so and I think we had the capital reserve, refresh my memory, but I think we had the capital reserves, but maybe we didn't have the trusts. And so those weren't closed out at that point in time. So
Okay.
there was, yeah.
Thank you.
Same with the library. I think it's, it was just a matter of, I mean, it's not like it's, it sounds like, oh, God, it's the end of the world, the library didn't send the records over. Well, it's not, it's really not, that it's not that it's a critical thing that, that we're missing something. It's just that, for whatever reason, we just didn't have those records. So there was nothing to report on. And so-
Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Hart.
I apologize for stepping out, and hopefully this mic doesn't get piked into the bathroom, so I don't know if these questions were asked, but can you help me understand GASB 34 standards?
No.
Because,
Nobody understands GASB 34 standards.
well, was this addressed while I was gone?
Sure.
No.
It's my understanding was that was something we had to start implementing last year, and if I remember correctly, basically anything that has capital value, like this table, anything that is something that's lasts durable good, has to be accounted for
Well,
and booked to some extent.
what the governmental account, GASB stands for Governmental Accounting Standards Board. They're the people in the high tower down there in New Jersey that set the rules, okay, that we all follow. And unfortunately, like a lot of those, like a lot of professional industries or whatever, those are the very large firms that represent those. And of course, there's other things associated with changing standards that resulted from Enron and some of these other financial fiascos, that things that funneled down through the Securities and Exchange Commission were adopted as standards because of the fact that, hey, we're dealing with public corporations here. Now, you're not publicly traded as in an IBM or something, but you're still a public company. And so that some of those things that IBM has to do and report to the Securities and Exchange Commission also got kind of wound into governmental accounting. Now, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board had GASB 34 was the one, was the beginning, if you will, where there's a lot more GASBs after that. But that was the one that basically changed the reporting standards. And it said that up until that point, we were reporting on funds only. The general fund, special revenue type funds, capital project type funds, enterprise type funds, and then we would have a consolidated sheet, if you will, that showed all those funds. What GASB 34 said is that we need to report on two bases now. On those budgetary basis, which is the way your books and records in the finance department are maintained. You vote a budget, you keep track of your beans, if you will, according to that budget, so that you know that you've spent within your legal guidelines. The next layer that GASB 34 added on was a consolidation and a restatement to accrual basis. Whereas before, our long-term debt and our capital assets kind of stayed on the side by themselves in fixed asset group of accounts and debt group of accounts. Most communities did not keep track of fixed assets, even though it was a requirement. Okay, there was always a qualification in the report that, except for the fact that the town doesn't keep track of its fixed assets like everybody else, because it's meaningless to a budgetary sense, we could qualify the opinion because it wasn't a component of equity. But when, and then you notice in there, when you read that opinion letter, there's multiple opinions in there now. There's the government-wide statements, there's the individual funds and other things. And so there's multiple opinions in there. And so now, because the capital assets and the long-term debt get onto those government-wide financial statements, they have an asset minus the liability, the net difference being that net investment in capital assets is a component of equity. We can no longer give you a qualified opinion. We'd have to give you an adverse opinion. We'd have to say, these financial statements don't meet generally accepted accounting principles because of this. And so that you'd have that stronger language in there. The other thing that GASB 34, the other big thing that GASB 34 imposed upon management is the management's discussion and analysis, the financial statements. This was a direct result of the financial fallouts, in that this is a demonstration that management understands what's in the financial statements. And so in a sense, this is your transmittal to the readers, the public, the bond, the people that are issuing you debt, things like that, that says, when you read these financial statements, we want you to notice these things, okay? Our operations were like this because, we had a flood down the street and we blew the budget, fixing it, that sort of thing. And so that's another big component that was required by GASB 34 as required supplementary information, which means that it's required to be in addition to the financial statements but because it's all subjective. It's management's discussion of these numbers. It's nothing that we can give an opinion on. Okay, so we don't need to give you a bad report if it's not in there. We just need to say that it's not in there. Yeah, and so in your case, it's in here, so you don't have that extra paragraph, if you will. So in a sense, you have what the industry would call an unqualified opinion, which means that you have no qualifications in your report at all, and that your statements meet generally accepted accounting principles without exception. And it's important, I guess, to know that your finance department has worked very hard to meet those requirements. And Government Finance Officers Association across the state has been active, and so the auditors don't want to take a step backwards, if you will, and start reporting on some cash basis or something, because the state's done a very good job of trying to meet generally accepted accounting principles.
Do you have a follow-up?
The audit for this year, since you basically are waiting for reporting information so the numbers can flow through the spreadsheet, are there any issues that are expecting to arise in terms of the management letter or in terms of our still meeting the GAAP standards?
No. As a result of the audit, I don't have any material findings. We had some discussion on changing procedures as a result of a few things during the year. Electronic registration of cars, for example, banking. Tax collector was having some difficulty verifying those deposits, and so the finance department, myself, the treasurer, tax collector, sort of put our heads together to try to develop procedures on that. Hopefully they're operational now.
I think that's helpful. And then I'm just trying to, in terms of the what you do in terms of the audit, because I the organization I work for has had an audit this past year, and so we had to do some of the stuff I imagine the town does. So I understand. For example, they asked, give us the information, the supporting information for each of these donations. So we had to go back and get the copies of the letter or the remittance envelope or whatever paperwork we had to show that this donor intended that gift to be used this way.
Mm-hmm.
So for the town, you said you might ask for a couple motor vehicle registration documentation maybe, or for the invoices for certain bills.
That's right, and we would
That's the
sample
same.
those items. I use as most auditors do, we use a statistical approach, and we use a random selection based on random numbers, so that any item, every item of a population of checks issued, say, have the same chance of being selected. The other thing that we do is we may look at very large transactions or unusual kinds of transactions and things like that. So we may sample those because for whatever reason we want to see what that is. But from the standpoint of doing a test of the system, we'll select a random selection, and based on that, we make a judgment to say, look, if these are correct, the classification is correct, if we've taken a discount, if we had it available to us, if the bill adds up correctly, and somebody checked the math to make sure it was paid, those kinds of things go into that test of an invoice or a test of, did they charge the right amount on a motor vehicle fee, or is the assessment on that property, we're not assessors, so we can't really make a judgment as to this property or that property having the correct assessment on it. We can say the assessment times the tax rate equals what was billed to the taxpayer, and we can look at it and we can say, yeah, this kind of makes sense in this community based on other properties that we saw, that we don't have, a 50,000 square foot house and it's only paying $1,000 in taxes or something, that sort of thing. So we can look at.
Okay. Thank you. That was helpful.
Thank you, Paul.
Do you want me to stay?
I would like you to
Okay.
stay so that the public has an opportunity to have any questions answered that you might
Okay.
have not answered already for
Sure.
them, okay?
Yep.
Not stay up there,
Not now,
but stay in
okay.
the audience.
That's what I meant.
Thanks.
That's what
Now that Mr. Mercier has given us an overall on our finances, I would like the town clerk and then the finance office to give us some details about the internal controls that we have currently. As Paul said, that there are times when he'll take samples of in-depth things, and I'd like to hear about those from the town clerk tax collector, Mrs. Becky Benvenuti, and then from Mel from the finance office, Melody Hodgkins.
Good evening. I have copies of my written presentation. If you'd like a copy, I can give them to you now, or,
I think now would be great if we can have
Okay.
it beforehand.
these cords are.
Thanks, Becky.
Okay. Okay, we have 4 staff members in our office, and the town clerk, we're town clerk and tax collector. Each of our staff persons assist with the daily collection of monies related to the functions of both the town clerk and the tax collector functions in the following manners. We receive monies in person, over the counter, cash and checks, through the payment drop box that's located on the outside of the building, which is a secure drop box that we pick up every morning, through the U.S. mail, checks, and through beginning this year, electronic funds deposited directly to our town's bank account through our town's online payment program. The types of monies that we handle in our office under town clerk tax collector functions include property taxes, resident taxes, motor vehicle registrations, boat registrations. We also serve as an agent for the state with both boat and motor vehicle registrations. And so we collect those state monies, which are not commingled with the town funds. And they're handled separately and deposited and reported separately. We also collect water and sewer payments, animal licenses, big variety of miscellaneous receipts such as notaries, copies, recycle bins, trash bags, transfer station coupons, burner permits, etc., as well as funds for vital records, birth certificates, death certificates, and the like. The internal cash management controls that we work with include all of our transactions are immediately recorded using the town's municipal software program, MuniSmart. Each staff person has a unique computer login and password that's known only to them. Every transaction that is performed by a staff person is recorded with their name and is clearly identified to that individual. All of our bills and receipts are sequentially numbered, and receipts are always given for any cash payment. At the end of each day, we balance all of our day's receipts, our day's checks, our day's cash, with the transactions that are recorded in our software program, both for the town and for the state. Our balancing procedure is performed as an office team, with each staff member having specific responsibilities in order to ensure proper cash management controls. For example, one person counts the cash, another person adds the check, and a third person confirms that the check and cash amounts agree with what's recorded in our software programs and matches the actual amounts. We begin and end each day with the same amount of cash in our town and state drawer, and that amount is verified at the end of the day by the closing staff, and it's verified again in the morning by the opening staff. Once we have balanced at the end of the day, our town and state bank deposits are separately prepared and our transactions are posted. Once posting occurs, the software will not allow any changes to be made to any of the posted transactions. The monies are deposited the following day to the bank with a police escort. Again, to ensure proper internal cash management, one staff person prepares the deposit, a separate staff person posts the computer work, and a third person carries the deposit to the bank along with a police escort and returns with the deposit receipts. The bank receipts are then matched and attached to the actual deposit slip created the previous day, and a duplicate deposit receipt is then given to the town treasurer. In addition to our daily routine collection processes that fall under the town clerk tax collector responsibilities, we also periodically receive monies from the following departments: the Recreation Department, the Police Department, the Fire and Ambulance Departments, the Planning and Zoning Department, and the Public Works and Transfer Station Attendant. These departmental monies are received directly from the departments, along with a batch transmittal that lists each payer, the cash or check amount, if it's a check, the check number, what account the monies are to be posted to, and the total department batch deposit amounts. Once we receive the batch, we verify and prove all the checks and the cash amounts as well as the total batch amount. A deposit is prepared and the monies are deposited to the banks, again, along with our regular daily deposit with a police escort the following day. A deposit receipt is then given to the town treasurer, and the reports are available to the finance director. In addition to this department, we also are now receiving and initially recording and depositing finance department monies. This is being done in accordance with a new procedure established with input from the town council this past spring. Since all mail addressed to the town hall is delivered initially to the town clerk tax collector office, we now open any mail that appears to contain any type of payment. Occasionally, mail that's addressed to others in the town hall does get forwarded, which contains checks. But the policy is that when this happens, the checks are to be returned to our office to be included with our finance department deposit. We also occasionally receive payments directly at the counter now from some of the local businesses that are finance department related monies. These monies include payments for such things as rent from municipal properties, miscellaneous accounts receivable, state highway block grants, state retirement funds, donations for flood victims, federal grants, insurance deductibles, franchise renewals, railroad tax, impact fees, trustee of trust fund monies, etc. We record these monies just as we do all other monies immediately in a separate computer batch labeled finance deposit. Each payment is posted individually to an account titled Payments to be Allocated. 2 photocopies of each check or cash is made, and the payor, check, or cash amount is appropriately recorded in the computer batch. At the end of each day, the batch is balanced and posted. The deposit is prepared and carried to the bank in the same manner as all of our other deposits. 1 copy of the finance deposit computer batch list and the checks are forwarded to the finance director, and a duplicate copy is kept in our office. The finance director, as I understand it, then transfers the payments from the payments to be allocated account to the appropriate individual revenue accounts. In summary, I would just like to respond to, I was a little surprised and perplexed at Paul's comments about the having problems verifying deposits with motor vehicle registrations that are received online, because we just implemented motor vehicle registrations in June, which was at the end of the last fiscal year, and I'm not aware of having difficulties verifying deposits. It's a new procedure, and I know there are some procedural issues that might make it easier between our office and the finance office in being able to identify it. But we handle motor vehicle transactions in exactly the same manner as monies. If you come in and register a motor vehicle, or if you send your money in by the mail, they're handled exactly the same way in a batch. And we don't touch the monies. The monies are directly deposited into the bank account, and our batches match the deposit amounts that are in the bank account. So I want to be clear about that, because that kind of took me off guard. We do work very hard in our office to adhere to the best management practices in all of our tasks. And we constantly brainstorm among ourselves and network with other town clerks and tax collectors about issues that arise and ways we might improve our practices. In addition, I attend programs in both the spring and the fall, which include presentations by the Department of Revenue Administration, the Attorney General's Office, the Secretary of State, and others, which provide guidance and suggested practices related to internal controls. In fact, we have implemented a number of changes over the past 2 years as a direct result of these presentations. And I will continue to strive to find even better ways to improve our procedures and efficiencies. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them from you or the public.
I think that you just proved my point of why I had you speak, so that everyone could have a thorough understanding of what happens in your office and what happens with the internal controls that we have. So I thank you very much, Becky, for that very thorough report.
Good, very good job.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Ms.
Okay.
Mel, would you mind coming up and telling us about the finance department and the internal controls within the finance department?
Thank you, Becky, for getting that all taken care of on that side. So, finance department is, we've got different aspects in it. We have the accounts payable function, we have the accounts receivable billing function, we have the payroll function, we have the water and sewer billing function, and we have the internal auditing function. We also have other purchasing manuals that we go by. For that side, there's many, many functions that we deal with in the finance department. I will start with the accounts payable function. The accounts payable function, each department gets their bills, signs off on it, codes it to the account in their budget. Then it's proceeded to go to our accounts payable clerk. She reviews it. There are times where we have seen some errors. We make those corrections per the budget. At that point, it's then entered in the system. She then cuts the checks. The treasurer or her assistant will sign them. Al signs off on the manifest. Then she posts the checks to the system. It automatically goes to the general ledger and gets posted to each account and the cash account. This is an automated system. There's no way to make any entries without a journal entry. That's the accounts payable function. The water and sewer billing is done by one of our accountants in-house. The actual meters read by the water and sewer department. We now have a handheld entry instead of trying to read it, handwritten. That's then put through the automatically through the system that we just put into place 2 years ago. Then once that's done, then our water and sewer accountant checks and makes sure there is no out of whack type of reading. If there is, then the water and sewer department goes back out and rechecks the amount that it's entered. Once that's done, then the warrant is posted. The bills are run by accounts, water and sewer person, and then she goes and reviews the bills to see if something's out of whack through the bills. At that point, the warrant is given to Al to sign to be able to transfer the actual documentation to the town clerk tax collector's office for collection. That's automatically done. All the bills that have been sent out have been posted automatically through the system, and a journal entry has to be done for that to be posted in the system. That's not an automatic thing that's done yet. We're hoping in the next couple of years it will be done. That's that function. The payroll function. The payroll function first starts with the department. They make out their payroll sheets. The department head signs off. Then the payroll sheets come to our payroll accountant. She then enters it into the accounts, the payroll software. She verifies the amounts when they're going through, so if there is a erroneous entry, we can try to catch it. Once that's done, the checks are signed by the treasurer or the assistant, usually the treasurer, and Al signs off in the manifests. In all these manifests, also, I forgot the treasurer also gets copies of them so she can verify when we do the bank reconciliations. And then the checks get sent out. We now have direct deposit. Those checks are automatically sent into the bank through our payroll clerk. She also is the one that distributes the checks. Then she posts it to the bank and calls for the T-tax. The posting to the accounts are automatically done through the modules right into the general ledger. Okay, so that's that function. She also does human resources functions as far as putting things in personnel policies and double checks to make sure we have all the paperwork for everyone, the I-9s, the W-4s, W-4s. The accounts receivable function, which is done by accounts payable, she bills out through, like for trash bags. Let's see, what else? We bill out for trash bags, police details, fire alarms, all kinds of miscellaneous things. She then posts those, or those get directly posted into the general ledger. And at that point, that's when the town clerk tax collector's office will take payment on that. And once we receive it back, we will then put it into those accounts. It's not good. At one point, we were actually doing the entries with the checks into the accounts receivable system, and that's not good. The ones that bill shouldn't be taking the payments. So we've changed that to the town clerk tax collector's office. Let's see. Then the internal control function, which I do. I do the journal entries. If I find something wrong, I do a journal entry. I do the bank reconciliations, which at that point we've had problems with some of the software transactions that when Becky posts, like when I can think of when Becky posts some of her entries, it doesn't always post correctly. So I then have to first notify the software vendor of the problem, see what it might have been, and if not, then I have to do a journal entry correcting that. I also work with the town treasurer. She verifies, she gets the bank receipts from town clerk tax collector's office. She gets the manifest from payroll. She gets the manifest from accounts payable. When she gets the bank statement has copies of all checks. She verifies the signatures on the checks. She verifies her deposit tickets with what is on the bank statement. She verifies the checks that are gone through with what we have on the manifest. We have an internal program with a bank reconciliation that we double check what's been posted to the general ledger is correct. Anything that's not, it can be automatically posted through the bank reconciliation, so it signifies that there was a problem that we had to post. I think that's it for that part. As far as I know, you wanted to know some of the things that are tested through, Paul named some of them. The accounts receivable. He does with the receipts from downstairs. He double checks those. He double checks the accounts payable. He double checks the W-2s with what's reported to the feds. There's a lot of things we double check. He double checks and makes copies of all the supporting documentation of each general ledger account. Sometimes, in the past he's asked for a certain account. Give me the whole year's worth of documentation. So I go and I print it out and give it to him. There have been times where he's asked, well, why? I think one year he asked me, every year it's different. It's not the same thing every year. One year he asked me why the motor vehicle account, why it only increased by 10% instead of 15% like it did before. And I says, well, I guess when they're not getting the newer cars. I mean, and when I gave him the account, it was all posted directly from all the modules. So it wasn't something that we were putting funds from one to the other. So in our system, in our general ledger, that's one thing that Paul can see. You can see what's been posted from each module into the general ledger, and then you can also see what's been posted as a journal entry. It's quite different. See what else? I mean, there's a lot of things we go through. This year, it wasn't just the trustees of trust funds. It was the enhancement project, the Main Street. We had to take out the water and sewer for the GASB 34, the fixed assets you had asked for. That took me a while I had to go back to the beginning of it and switch over all those into different funds. So we now have 3 funds instead of 1. So that was another thing we did. We had to do all the July bank statements. And I know there was a question on who requested. I've been thinking about leaving for, January 2005, when my future ex-husband and I decided to start a business together. So I wouldn't leave the town in lurch. I asked Paul to come in July. So most of the audit would be done. But there are things that just, either come up in the audit that still has to be done, or we just, like the trustees' trust funds, they don't get their information from the banks until August. So, and that there was 1 year, and I think Councilor Glennon, you alluded to that earlier, when GASB 34, we had to put the fixed assets. That was a big year, because we've never done it before. And we had to account for all roads, and not just account for them, you also had to put a price tag on them when we thought they were put at what year. We had to do I just got the sidewalks. I don't have it in the fixed assets. I just got the listing this time to get into the capital improvement program. So we still have to do that. We had to do all the water lines, all the sewer lines. It was a major undertaking. And to put the price on it. And Paul and I had many of conversations on how to do that to get the history, and now we keep track of through the projects. We have a lot of projects going on, and we keep track of that, and then we add it to the fixed asset system. And we have certain accounts that he takes off and puts in, like our vehicles and stuff. He has to verify what I'm putting in with what the account. So I'm not just saying, oh, let's just add in another vehicle to our listing. And I think, unless I've forgotten something, and I'm sorry I wasn't more prepared, I've been working, trying to finalize getting the budget together today. So before my last hurrah today. So Al and Don can take it from there. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer anything. I'm here to.
Councilor Glenn and I'm going to let you ask the question, but I would like to also move along quickly because there are a lot of people here that would like to speak too. So I'd like to get to them. So go ahead, Councilor Glenn.
Melanie, for the public who may not know, can you let them know who is currently our town treasurer?
Town treasurer is Belinda Cameri.
Okay.
And she was asked to be here this evening, but she was unable to attend.
Yeah, and she does have a very good background in
Yes.
banking. I think you would concur
Yes,
with
she
that.
has many years in banking. She works for UNH right now.
Okay. And currently, what is your staff level at, full-time and part-time?
We've got 3 part-timers upstairs, and those are the people that I was talking about. We've also got a full-time MIS person. We've got a full-time assessor, full-time planner, and a full-time project coordinator.
And are they all part of the finance department?
The finance department consists of the MIS and the 3 other accountants.
Okay. And my final question is, because I'm not familiar, I've heard the term before, but I'm not totally familiar with what it really is. Can you explain for the purpose of the public and myself what a manifest is?
A manifest is all it is a check register that lists the check number, who was paid to, how much, and the description that we put in.
Thank you.
Councilor Hart?
If one of those envelopes with a check in it slips by Becky's eyes when the mail's received, so it comes upstairs, can you just, and who opens it and what, oh, whoops, this has a check in it. What's the next step? Can you help us understand that?
Well, it depends on who opens the mail, and we send it back down to usually Jacene, because I think Jacene's the one that deposits them, or Becky, or we just hand deliver it too, depending on, what's going on that day.
And is it usually like the day you receive it or together all at the end of 1 week?
It depends on who opens the mail. Some people like to open the actual envelopes. I know in my office, sometimes it's 2 or 3 days if it gets put in without. The ladies are doing a lot better at opening up for me and getting the stuff back down there.
Thank you.
Councilor LaBranche?
A quick question on the manifest. You stated that town administrator basically signs off on the manifest.
Yes,
So you see the manifest, town administrator sees it. Does anyone else see the manifest?
treasurer
Treasurer. That's it?
and the accounts payable clerk.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and also the auditor. Sorry.
Anybody else?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you. I have asked the new finance director to speak, but I think I'd like to hold off on that because I really want to give people from the public an opportunity to speak, and I feel like we have given them a lot of information, so I would like to hear from them. I am going, thank you, Mel,
Thank
if
you.
you don't mind staying too, if questions come up. I am going to open the public hearing for the Citizen Concerns Initiative Petition Referendum, Section 8.2 from the Town Charter. I'm going to read the petition. Dear members of the Newmarket Town Council, on November 8th, 2006, a petition was presented to me as town clerk and is stated as follows. And so the public knows there are copies of it at the end of the table. In accordance with the Town of Newmarket Municipal Code TC Article 8, Citizen Concerns Initiative Petition Referendum, Section 8.2, an initiative petition of the undersigned, duly registered voters of the Town of Newmarket, New Hampshire, 03857, hereby directs the Newmarket Town Council to immediately contract with a regionally prominent accounting auditing firm to perform a detailed, independent audit for the express purpose of verifying records, processes, or functions for an orderly transition to a new finance director and town administrator in 2007. Such an audit, completed within 120 days of contract award, would add value by identifying any weaknesses for correction and ensuring confidence in the Town of Newmarket's fiscal operations. Specifically, the audit objective should focus on identifying the essential information to develop an overall picture of Newmarket's fiscal operations, validating administrative flows for soundness and compliance by town employees, verifying that the town meets generally accepted accounting principles. Finally, this petition requires that upon completion of the audit, a copy of the results be made available to any citizen of Newmarket within 30 days of that date. The cost of a copy to be borne by the requester. Pursuant to Article 8, Section 8.2 of the Town of Newmarket Charter, I have verified the number of registered voters signing the petition. Upon examination, I found there were 140 signatures on the petition. Of those signatures, 3 were not on the voter checklist of voters for the Town of Newmarket. In addition, I was unable to identify one of the signatures either by printed name or by address. This results in there being a total of 136 signatures that are valid according to the Town Charter. I hereby certify the petition to be sufficient with 136 valid signatures. This was written by Becky Benvenuti, the Town Clerk Tax Collector. At this point, I'm going to ask members from the public to come up to the podium. Please state your name and your address and speak into the microphone. You are addressing the council, and we will do our best to answer your questions. Questions that we cannot answer, I will be writing them down, and then we will invite the appropriate person up to answer those questions, whether it be the finance department, town clerk's office, or the administrative office. Please come on up.
Madam Chairman, David Byrd, 42 Smith Garrison Road in Newmarket, taxpayer. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and also to reiterate the fact that the town charter works. Democracy does work in Newmarket, and it does work in the state of New Hampshire. As attested to, 136 of us have signed a petition requesting an independent audit. Perhaps some of the background, and I'll be very brief, don't want to belabor this. I look at you folks right here as the town council, as the board of directors, equating to a corporation. Mr. Dixon as the chief executive officer, and perhaps Ms. Hodgen as the chief financial officer. Both have been here a combined 9 years, 8 years respectively, if I understand. We have a new gentleman coming in, Mr. Parnell, and our welcome to you. And when you do change out financial personnel or people that have had much dealing with financial applications, checks, etc., it is generally thought that you have an independent audit. And I appreciate also Mr. Mercier and his comments, but I'd like to mention that he first signed off in the town council or the town report on the 30th of June, 1998, making his audit of the town 8 consecutive years, going on 9. What we're asking is an independent company to be separately contracted with for the benefit of not only the Board of Directors, Town Council, but those of us that are tax-paying citizens in the town of Newmarket, to validate that the books are working correctly as well expressed by Ms. Hodgson and the town tax collector. That is the purpose of this initiative petition, is a second set of eyes to verify for all of us that the books are right, given that in excess of $60+ million has probably transitioned through the town and so forth. And I might add, you don't deficit spend in a town. Mr. Dixon, I appreciate that, because you just tax us to get the money to get it back into the black. So thank you very much.
Just to let you know, you don't need to raise your hand. Just when the podium's open, you're welcome to just walk right up.
Thank you. Jim Fitzpatrick, 9 Osprey Lane in Newmarket, New Hampshire. I really wanted to make just very few points and then yield the floor. I think the previous speaker and your reading of the petition described exactly what we want. I think it was clear in the petition. And the why of an outside audit, well, it's not a question of the Mercier Group's integrity or capability, not at all. We have full faith and confidence in that. What we're talking about here, and as is described in the petition, is a different kind of an audit, actually. Again, as the previous speaker said, we're asking for new eyes to take a look at it, but with those new eyes, this is more like what's known as a prescribed procedures review. That's actually apparently one of the technical terms. I'm not a CPA, but I know some. The point of this is to validate the administrative flows for soundness and compliance by the town employees. We're not saying they aren't. We want to know that those flows are totally in compliant with what we have in mind. And at the same time, review those flows for compliance with town policies, procedures, federal law, and state RSAs, because over time the state apparently is going to review their laws, as does the federal government. Are all our policies and procedures in total step with that? And identify in that review, identify the strengths and the weaknesses for correction. The whole point of this is to generate a report of things we might do better. All right? Why now? Well, I think, again, it's because we're changing administration. This is the time. It is important for our new finance director to have a clear picture of where we are. But as we go out and recruit a new town manager after Al's tenure, it, I think, is a very important tool in that recruitment. If the man before you, and as you're interviewing him, says, well, how do things sit here? You can say, well, according to our independent audit, or our 2 audits, this is exactly where we stand. Here are his recommendations. What do you think? Those are all good questions to a prospective candidate, I would think. And why the petition initiative? Why did we do this? Well, it's kind of, as was alluded to before, it's standard business practice. And we can say that the town is not a for-profit business. Clearly we're not. But we can learn a lot from following that kind of thing. When you change the leadership at this level, this is standard practice, not at all unusual. It's fundamental to evaluating our financial affairs going forward. I think we all understand that. And I think, additionally, it reaffirms an openness and confidence between the town administration and the citizens it serves. And that concludes my comments. I thank you for listening.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
As I read over the petition, and you stated that you thought that it specifically, that it actually says specifically the audit objective should focus on. And when I read through these, I feel that these issues have been addressed in our previous audits and in the audits that we get done. So are you saying that I want to understand completely what you're looking for? So let me just finish quickly. So are you asking for a second set of eyes researching the same information that's been done
No,
here?
I'll say
You're
it
looking
again.
for a specific,
the Mercier Group stood here and described a balance audit, a books audit.
Right.
And I have full faith and confidence, as I said, that that's what we get every year, the books balance. I believe that. But that's a dollars and cents audit. That's not a compliance audit with policies and procedures, which is exactly the second bullet of the petition. So it's a different kind of audit. Any other questions?
And would you also be looking for, as Paul Mercier said, that there's also things called an expanded scope audit, which would be a study of a more detailed account of procedures. This,
I'm not a CPA, but if that's, I would have to ask Mr. Mercier if that's
Prescribed procedures.
is the same thing. We're talking
it's the
about
same
that,
thing, so
yes.
it's the exact same thing. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
How was that worded?
Prescribed procedures review.
Prescribed procedural review.
Russ Simon, 510 Cushing Road, taxpayer as well. I think to the point, and I don't know if the last speaker would agree, but in the report that Mr. Mercier puts out, it says that they've considered the internal control structure in order to determine the scope of the auditing procedures. But in the next line, it says, our review of these systems was not intended to provide assurance on the internal control structure, nor should be relied on to do that. That's in the town's annual report. In another section, it says, our consideration of internal control structure would not necessarily disclose all matters in the internal control structure that may constitute reportable conditions, and accordingly would not necessarily disclose all reportable conditions that are also considered to be material weaknesses. So I just hope that clarifies that we're looking for something slightly different. It's a normal management practice during a time of changing both our senior town administrator and our senior finance director to just test check and make sure everything's fine, look at the controls, the authorized signers, how money moves between accounts. I think tonight we heard that definitely on the revenue side, it sounds like there's a full set of procedures, and on the accounts payable side, but who authorizes funds transfers between which accounts and things like that. There's a variety of procedures and controls to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public?
Oh, one other thing. If this-
Can you just go to the mic? Sorry, we're on television.
Just as one other point, if this is the first time, Paul, that you've met with the town council in your 9 years, that's a good thing from putting our petition together.
agree, absolutely, I agree.
Hi, I'm Linda Facto. I live at 244 Ash Swamp Road in Newmarket. Couple questions based on some of what Mr. Mercier said and the last gentleman just asked is, I'm very curious as to why the town council and Mr. Mercier have never met. If you are considered like the board of directors in a private company, auditors usually, and 99% of the time, do meet with the companies to go over what their findings are. Second, I was wondering if there is a separate management letter that is generated besides the financials that would give any reportable findings as well as non-reportable findings, who that would go to, does the council see it, and who follows up to make sure that everything that has been mentioned in that report is taken care of before the next audit.
I'll answer both of those for you. The second one first is there a separate report from the auditor that goes directly to management that's not in the auditor's report? If there is, I haven't seen one. Is there, Administrator Dixon, is there a managerial report that goes in addition to the auditor's report?
I'll have to refer to Paul.
That was the report on report on internal controls. That first report that's in the report, that communication reportable conditions and other matters, that is the management letter. Over the years, there may have been comments more detailed in there. I generally tend to be less detailed in that letter and provide supporting documentation maybe that would have been attached to representation letters over the years with more specifics. So we'd have to look back through the files and see what.
So just so I understand that, there wouldn't be one official other letter with all the detail, but as you're trying to get more information, you would send notes asking for more details or saying that this might be a problem area?
If I had a specific issue, I might in that report on reportable conditions make a generalized statement and then support that with more detailed information regarding specifics, only because there's just so much room and discussion. Because the purpose of the audit is to we study the internal controls to determine the scope of the audit, and I agree with the gentleman that a prescribed procedures audit would be more detailed, and so that. So for purposes of the audit, if something came to our attention, we'd disclose it in that letter. So that in effect would be the audit management letter and would have been bound in with your reports. There wouldn't be a separate letter each year.
While you're there, what would be, could you give a rough cost estimate of what the prescribed procedure review audit would look like? Would that be more or less or around what the price of a general audit?
Would be a function of time. You'd hire a management company.
A management company?
Yeah, like maybe a municipal resources type company that has people that are familiar with all aspects of the details of the assessing functions or of the finance functions or of the police department functions, and they would look at those procedures to make sure that you were doing things that were compliant with specific state laws, and that you were logging evidence correctly, those kinds of things, and so that it would be a function of time and rate for those individuals.
Okay, so it wouldn't be something that an auditing firm necessarily, it wouldn't be something you would do, or another independent auditor might not do.
Well, you might go to an audit firm for an expanded review of the internal controls over the financial operations, but you wouldn't necessarily go to an audit firm to ask, is our manager managing correctly?
Right. Okay.
You'd go to somebody who has experience managing.
Thank you.
More experience.
To answer your other question, or to not answer, I'm not sure why the town council has not contacted the town auditor before. When I called him last week or so to talk to him, he did say it was the first time that he had ever spoken to a counselor, and he was looking forward to coming and speaking to the council. So it could be a procedural thing. Maybe the administrator could speak to that. Maybe the procedure was set up by previous counselors that he spoke directly with the finance and administrator.
There was never any point in time when the auditor was refused an opportunity to come meet with the council and talk over the audit. That was always an opportunity if there was any questions. The council gets the full audit every year when it's available. They have ample time to review it and everything like that. If the council had some questions, certainly we would have had the auditor here. In fact, I've served other communities, and it's rare that we had the auditor in, except if there was, as a result of the review of the audit, some questions that the council wanted to have answered.
So actually, maybe too, some of the other senior counselors can answer that. Councillor Hart and then Councillor Glennon.
Well, as you all know, that we're all essentially volunteers on the council. So when we start the job, which for me was 4 years ago, we inherit a lot of the policies, procedures of the previous council. And it was not something that had occurred in any of the years. And so with the result of getting the petition, I called 2 towns, Durham and Exeter, They've both gone through transitions recently, and that's where, in talking with Todd Selig, the town administrator in Durham, he said, well, usually we have the auditor in before the audit to see if the council has any questions that they want specifically looked into, which in this case, if this had been brought up at that point, if we had done that, maybe we would have said, we want you to do a prescribed procedures review of the finance office since the finance director is leaving. And then the report's issued by the auditor and it comes back and there's a presentation maybe made to the council. So from that conversation is why it was brought up at the last meeting when Jen was sick, that this should happen tonight. And so hopefully this will be something that we do going forward with whoever the auditor is. The other thing is Todd did not recall and Exeter did not recall doing anything like this when their finance town administrator left of 18 years, George Olson in Exeter, or when the finance director left in Durham. That's not to say it didn't happen, but I keep hearing that this is common. I'm not sure if it's common in municipalities. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but it might be common in business world where money is a profit, but it's not necessarily, from what I've heard, common. And if I'm inaccurate about that, if there's examples otherwise, I'd be happy to hear them. But the two towns I spoke to, it wasn't that case. So hopefully it's something that we go forward and do. And this year we'll be putting out, I believe, the audit proposal for bid as the charter requires again. And he's operating underneath a contract that's many years in place. And we had a very good price through that contract.
Councillor Glennon?
I would also piggyback on what Councilor Hart just said. The council is a volunteer group. However, I do think the council should have taken the initiative and requested to meet with the auditor. So there's a blame there also. It's not just a one-sided thing. In the future, hopefully, we'll learn lessons on this and we'll become more involved with the auditor and with the finance department. And just a point of correction, Madam Chair, I did, as a counselor, speak with Paul Mercier last year. So there has been a contact with a current counselor with Mr. Mercier last year. And I think you would agree with that, Paul? Okay, so that's just a point I wanted to correct where it was stated earlier that no counselor has ever spoken with him. I did speak with him. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry that I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody else from the public?
Hi, Rich Alperin, 204 South Main Street. Could you please let us know how and when a final determination on this petition will take place? In other words, are you going to now meet behind closed doors, discuss it amongst yourselves? And then when you do, how will you let us know that you've made a final determination?
I'd like to answer that if I could, at a point.
Go ahead, Councillor Glennon.
Well, and the reason why I would like to do that, Madam Chair, because I have the same question. Where do we go from here, listening to the public's concern? I would propose at this point, if the council is in agreement and if the public's in agreement, a blue ribbon panel that would review some of the questions that have come up and give it a deadline of, say, 30 days. In that blue ribbon panel, I would recommend that there be 2 councilors and 5 members from the petition who signed this petition. So we can meet once a week for, say, 30 days to formulate what it is the public is looking for and then give that information directly to the council, rather than going on a debate all night long. I think we've heard the message, at least I've heard the message, that there are some concerns here, and there is a change of policy. There's not policy, a change of administration, and we really want to make sure everything is working properly. So that would be my proposal, and I'd like to hear the rest, comments from the rest of the council on that.
My intention is to keep the public hearing open as long as people have comments from the public. At that point, I'll close the public hearing, and then the council will discuss it, and the council members will make motions on whether or not to continue this to another meeting or make a decision tonight. I would, my opinion about what the process that you just stated, Councillor Glennon, was I think I have a pretty clear idea of what the petition is saying and what they want. And I've just clarified that with 2 of the speakers, that they're looking for a prescribed procedural review audit. So I think waiting 30 days and dragging this out with lots of other conversations, I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what they're looking for. But again, it'll be something that the council will motion and decide when the public hearing is closed. But it won't be in a non-public session. Is there anybody else from the public? Jack?
Excuse me. Jack Fitzgibbon, Maple Crest, Newmarket, taxpayer. The first I heard about this petition was through the graciousness of my paperboy, Foster's Daily Democrat. And I respect editorials, and I don't know how it got there, and I'm not concerned with that. There was nothing that was specific in what I read, except that I knew there was a petition under the charter, which I am proud to have participated in at the time we put that in there. And it can be for, it's very broad, can be for anything that wants to be contested whatsoever. And I sat in here between 7 and 8, and I realized, as many of you know, I don't catch on too quickly, but I was completely in the dark. I think it would have been helpful if we had reviewed verbatim the right to petition from the charter, someone read that, and then specifically made reference to what the petitioners wanted, which I didn't really learn until about, a little after 8. And I think you'd have more input at this podium right now, and probably, when you open up the public input. It doesn't seem like the whole procedure was any more than everyone just pointing out what their particular procedure was, whether it was Mr. Mercer from the level outside of the town to Becky and Melody. And even after I get through, I have no question of it. I have no doubt about the way they operate, or the town for that matter, since it is audited every year. Finally, with all due respect to Dave and whoever, I think the request they're making is quite valid, but I didn't understand where they were going until I heard it tonight about a few minutes after that 8 o'clock. I do agree with what you just said. There's nothing worse than committees, whether they be blue ribbon or otherwise. If you want to, if you want something to never get resolved, we all know, just appoint a committee. So with regard to what you just said, Jennifer, I agree with that. And I would hope that this thing would be resolved so that when the time comes for Al to relinquish his position or anyone else, and we make a transition, that it's done as smoothly as possible and to everyone's satisfaction in the community. I hope that's what happens anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public?
Hi, Amy Thompson, 109 Langs Lane, taxpayer. It just occurred to me sitting here that somebody very nicely said that municipalities are run a little bit differently than business practices, and things are done a little bit differently at the town level. And it occurs to me, just for everybody's thought, I guess, is that sometimes maybe if the town and maybe bigger on governments ran more like a business, we might be better off. We all run a degree of business ourselves, whether it's a store or a company or even our own homes. So, thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public? Mr. Pickering?
Larry Pickering, Ash Swamp Road. As always, I'm concerned about the costs of whatever we're trying to do, and the budget cycle is June 1 through, July 30th through June 1. July 1 through June 30th?
Yeah.
Excuse me. And there's been no money allocated to do additional audits. We do allocate money to do an audit each year. And where's the money coming from? What account are we going to rob from to make this happen? I don't have a problem with what the petition's asking. I have a problem with where do we get the money to do it?
I think that's going to depend on how much money
Correct.
it's going to cost. And at this point, it would have to come from the town council's contingency fund.
Because quite often throughout the year, good ideas come up, but unfortunately, they come up after the budget cycle. The money's already been put in place to do whatever that's been asked by whoever for the ensuing year. And then all of a sudden, we're approached, and where does the money come from? And I understand contingency, but I would assume this is going to be an expensive proposition. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And I'm going to open up the discussion with the town council. Councillor Hart?
Town Administrator, did you try to get any quotes from firms for initiating this?
Actually, Councillor Hart, you just reminded me that I had asked our new finance director to be prepared to speak with us on that specific
Great,
issue.
thank you.
So I'll invite him to the podium at this time.
And here I thought I was going to get away with it.
Yes.
To answer your question.
Do you just want to introduce yourself, being new? Everyone
Okay.
might not know.
I'm Don Parnell, I'm the new finance director for the town. As part of the question, the answer to your question, initially reading the petition, I had questions myself as to what the scope of this type of an audit would be. I did show this to 2 different auditing firms. One thought it would be a normal audit, which they thought would cost between $5,000 and $10,000 to do. Another auditing firm, which I discussed over the phone with, said to him, it sounds like they might be looking for a forensic audit, which could have a cost of $30,000. I think we've learned tonight that what they're asking for is very different from what both had surmised by reading the petition. I really don't know what the cost is going to be. But had you gone in different directions with the requirements of the petition, those were some of the areas you were looking at. At this point, I really can't guess what cost would be associated with that. We can certainly, now that the parameters seem to be in place as to what the petitions are looking for, get some ideas as what that would cost.
And you've identified at least one, I think, source that we could get that done, right?
Yes,
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
And Mr. Mercer alluded to that too. It's MRI, which I believe the town's done business with before, to come in and do that type of audit. They are staffed to do that. Their availability, I'm not sure. I'd have to talk to them. And they could certainly give us an idea what it would cost.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Okay, so that helps with that question. That's what I was trying to understand. In terms of how I'm understanding this, the only part that I think we should go with in this petition is the second bullet. The first one is this report. The second one is the fact that this report, the audit says we do meet the gap. And I think if the council decides to do anything, I would hope it would be this validating administrative flows for soundness and compliance, which sounds like, just from the name of it, prescribed procedures review, sounds like that's what it is. So I know the whole council needs a chance to discuss it, and I would suggest that in proceeding, we direct the town administrator and finance director to get quotes from MRI and other firms to do a prescribed procedures review. I don't think we need to do the first or third bullet again. I think that information is there. There's been no information provided by anybody otherwise. There's been very good questions brought up about why we should make sure that the procedures we're using within the different departments to handle expenditures and revenue are consistent and, to the best they can be, tamper-proof and fraudulent-proof. And I think that makes sense to do it anytime. We haven't done it apparently in the last 9 years, so this is as good as time as any. But that's where my thoughts are right now.
Administrator Dixon and then Counselor Glennon.
Yes, there are certified auditing firms that specialize in this also. There are specialized accounting certified auditing firms that specialize in that type of thing. And I was involved in one several years ago, and I don't know what it would be today, but it was $12,000 in a similar sized town. What we wanted to do is review all of the procedures and you know, internal controls. So just that's all I could offer you on that right now until we get new quotes.
Counselor Glennon.
Don, do you think, and I think it was an unfair question to have you try to come here tonight to give us some quotes, because we didn't know what the full scope of what it was, but could you possibly have a quote ready for council at the business meeting next week, which is Wednesday? Or an estimate to what, at that point?
I can try. I can't guarantee anything, but we might be able to get some parameters as to what a ballpark figure
Okay.
to do that.
Okay. The second part of my concern here is that I don't quite agree with Councilor Hart. I do agree with item number 2 should be looked at, but I feel that item number 2 also plays a hand in with item number 1 on this, because if you're going to look at the validating administrative flows for soundness and compliance by town employees, I would want to make sure if those are correct, then it would validate number 1, but number 1 by itself taken out, I think they work hand in hand with each other. I would agree that we've already been told this evening by Paul Mercier that we are in compliance with the GAP procedures. So that's where I stand on this. And I do want to thank everybody coming here tonight and for all the speakers who spoke very eloquently about what their processes are and how they do their jobs.
Counselor LaBranche.
Just a quick question for Don. Would you say that a forensic audit would be a top price and anything would be lower than that? Or could this be higher than a forensic audit?
Perhaps, probably Paul might be a little bit better to answer that. As far, he might have a better feel about pricing parameters between the two. Paul, can I ask you to do that? Sure.
A forensic audit would be typically if you had suspicion of fraud or something like that, it'd be a very, very detailed analysis of lots of detailed transactions looking for an outcome. As far as a group of managerial type professionals coming in and looking at procedures in various departments, I think it's going to depend on a couple of things. It's going to depend on the knowledge and experience of the people that are doing the work, because they'll be very efficient. They'll say, geez, you know, you could do this better or that better. Don's probably already got some ideas just from coming from a different city as to how you're doing procedures, so that it's going to really be a function of who does it and how long it's going to take, you know.
So it could cost more than a forensic, is what you're saying?
I would say not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But at the same time, you may have managerial professionals that are at a higher rate than a forensic auditor might be. You might have a forensic auditor at $200 an hour and a financial professional at $500 an hour. You know, so it could be a function of time and dollars.
Thank you.
And I think just to answer to address what you had said, Councillor Glennon, was that Don was charged at getting opinions on the petition from different auditors about how they would perceive it and what they would do. And as you heard, that auditors perceived it differently and associated different costs with that. So he wasn't actually setting it out to bid. He was getting a feel for, what does this petition mean to you as an auditor, and what do you think they're asking for in this petition, and what are the relative costs associated with that? And at that point, it was never defined that we were looking at, until this evening, that we were looking at the prescribed procedural review on it. So
I was
that's
under the
something
impression
different.
at the last meeting we had asked for quotes to be brought in. And
An
they-
estimate for what it might cost.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Are there any other counselors? Counselor Pulaski?
On the subject of cost, obviously the money is going to come from the town council contingency fund. Is there a balance to that fund right now? And what is it if you have that information?
Yeah, it's like 8, it's either 10 or 8.
We dropped it.
The budget for that account is $7,500. I don't think you've approved anything from it yet this year, so it should be intact.
Thank you. And my next question up for discussion with council is if this audit should cost more than $7,500, where is the money going to come from?
That's something that we need to figure out. Because it's not, we don't have it, it's not a budgeted item. Counselor Hart?
I'll make a motion to direct the town administrator and finance director to receive bids or quotes. I guess it would be bids because it's over $5,000. To have a firm do a procedural,
Prescribed
Thank you.
procedural review audit.
prescribed procedural review of the town's
Validating administrative flows for soundness and compliance by town employees.
Usually I'm the one who's doing that kind of help, but thank you for that. And to bring them back for consideration by the workshop, because I don't think next week is reasonable if we want to have a good discussion, the December workshop. And at that point, I would suggest that we can have a better discussion about where the money would come from, because we'll know the cost.
Would you,
Second that motion.
would you, is there discussion on the motion? Counselor Hamel, Jerry Hamel?
Does that motion direct us to proceed with that particular audit or discuss?
Well, I think we have to get the bids and then decide, because if it's $50,000, it's like, whoa, maybe we don't need to do the entire review of every single department that handles money.
So it's
I don't
more
know.
specific to getting the quotes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think we should proceed, but I'm not going to proceed blindly without knowing the cost.
Counselor, are you through, Counselor Hamel?
I think, yeah.
Counselor Hart, would you be willing to amend your motion to include also a cost associated with an independent auditor identifying the essential information to develop an overall picture of Newmarket's fiscal operations? Because I think what I've heard very clearly is that they're asking for an additional type of audit, but also a second pair of eyes to look at the audit that's been done by an auditor for 7 to 8 years. And again, it would be just to get cost estimates of what that would be.
Well, no.
Okay.
And the reason being because we know that's going to cost $7,500 to $10,000 to do just the regular audit. And no one's provided any information as to why Mr. Mercier's work should not be believed. Now, if we do the validation and we find that there's significant issues with how we handle money, then maybe we do need to do the full thing. But I don't want to spend money unnecessarily. That's how I'm seeing it.
Okay, just so that you know that it would, we don't necessarily know that it would be between $7,000 and $10,000 at this stage in the game, because our auditor has been doing it for 8 years, and it could be substantially more than $10,000. Okay.
Yeah, at least that much, yeah. Just for the audit.
Can you do that motion again, read it again, because I'm totally confused.
The motion is to direct the town administrator and/or finance director to receive estimates from firms, bids, to do a, I got it, prescribed procedures review to validate the administrative flows for soundness and compliance by town employees, and to bring them forward for consideration at the December workshop.
And so we're just getting a quote. That's it. Nothing else. We're not even,
Our rules require us to get bids for proposals over $5,000, which this will cost. So yes.
so we're not, Madam Chair, can I speak?
You are, yep.
Thank you. So we're not saying to the public here at this point that we are going to go ahead with an audit. We're gonna go and get a cost estimate. If the cost is too high, what do we do there to the public?
We might reevaluate the scope of the work, because this is saying every town, this would, in my opinion, what I would do if I got this request, I would say, I'm gonna look at how the police department handles money, the recreation department, the finance department, the town clerk, the tax collector, every department that handles money. And maybe we just wanna look at the finance department, but that's not what I heard tonight. I heard everything. So I'm saying, let's get the proposal for everything, and if it's within a range that we think we can afford within the budget, let's do it. If it's too expensive, we may have to reevaluate and narrow it down.
Okay, I understand that process. However, what about all of this money we have in, I'm not sure what account is called, $4 million that we have. Council can authorize monies to be taken from that particular account to pay for such things.
No, that's
That
for
come-
capital improvements, I believe.
But
and-
isn't there,
There's no general fund?
is there a general fund or something we transfer each year from one area to another area?
Councillor Glenn, we can't take from the general fund. That would have to go as a warrant article, and the people would have to vote on taking the money from the general fund. But just to clarify something, Councillor Glennon, is this is let's say that we're all in agreement of doing this. This is the first step in doing that. We can't say at this point, we're going to go ahead and do this without knowing how much it's going to cost.
I understand that, but it's
Okay.
not giving the public any assurance that we're gonna do something either. It's just saying, we're gonna get a cost. If it's too high, well, we're gonna scale it back.
Councillor Hart just said that, but the other councillors did not say if it's too high, we're going to not do it.
Okay.
I said we could
Point of-
scale it back.
All right, point of clarification, thank you.
Councillor Pulaski.
One of the point, what's being asked for on the bullet that we have decided to have an estimate for, says validating administrative flows for soundness and compliance by town employees. The way that is worded, that is every procedure. How do you handle personnel issues? How do you handle a broken down truck? How, operating procedures of every department. We're not talking just finances according to this petition. It's saying administrative, and administrative procedures include more than finance.
Well, as the person who made the motion, my intent was to focus on the financial
I
procedures,
would
and I
agree.
think that's the intent of the
Yeah, I do
petitioners.
too.
But if I'm wrong, I see head shaking up and down, so, which is, I think, the first time since I was talking, but.
Just to read the last paragraph of the petition, such an audit completed within 100 days of contract award would add value by identifying any weaknesses for correction and ensuring confidence in the town of Newmarket's fiscal operations.
I agree.
Are there any other councillors? Councillor LeBranch?
I had
And
heard,
Councillor Hamel?
I had heard the firm MRI mentioned. Is that someone that we would want the town administrator to go through to get these quotes? I believe MRI is like they have a pool of people that do this. Is that the way I understand it?
Don, do you mind coming to the mic and explaining MRI?
Actually, yes, they do have people. They have people on staff that are former finance directors, town managers, and everything in between, that would be the people that would come out and actually do the review that you're looking for. So they would be the people that would take some of their staff to come out. So they would actually be one of the ones that would bid on the process.
So MRI would be one that we would want
Yeah.
the administrator to go to.
They're the ones that come to mind now, but there may be others.
Right.
Which we'll have to research that would do the same thing.
Because I do believe that that's who Durham used recently.
They're the most notable in the state as far as having the staff to do it.
Thank
And
you.
I think Councilor Hart's motion would include several different firms bidding on it. So MRI would be one of several.
Okay,
And then
thank
we
you.
would look at their qualifications and make a decision. Councilor Wilfred Hamel, I'm sorry, Councilor Branch, go ahead.
Would we have at least 3?
Can
Three.
you make sure we have at least 3 if the motion gets passed?
I'm not sure if Alan knows if there's any more than maybe 2 in the state that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we might have a hard time getting more than 2, or possibly we could get 3. There may be a couple, like I said, CPA firms that have specialized,
And it may be possible you might want to go out of state too, and, but I think that's going to change the cost quite a bit if you do that.
Okay, thank you.
but I think what you want to do is try to get a feel of qualified candidates, right? Qualified firms, so you have some competition.
Oh, to get that done.
Where did this come from?
Just some research I did.
Okay, these, do you mind if I?
No, I have no
Okay,
problem at all.
these are CPA auditing firms, but they're not necessarily the managerial.
Not from MRI or.
From the,
But MRI may use some of those people, from what
Okay.
I hear.
okay. So I'll use this information and work with Don to try to find at least 3, if the motion passes. Do you have any other thing?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you for this. Counselor Wilfred Hamel.
Yes, Madam Chairman, if we're all done adding ifs, buts, and whereas, if we're all done adding ifs, buts, and whereas, would you please repeat it one more time, period? I'd appreciate it.
Do you want to repeat your motion, Counselor Hart?
Sure.
The motion was to direct the town administrator and the finance director to get at least 3 bids, if possible, for a prescribed procedures review to validate the administrative flows for soundness and compliance by town employees, and to prepare that in time for the December workshop for further consideration by the council.
Thank you.
Is there any more discussion? I'm going to offer up one more suggestion for an amendment, Counselor Hart.
Okay.
Sorry, Wilfred. But that because this petition is concerned about the 2 positions leaving, that it would be possibly, I'd be willing to personally work with the new finance director, and the 2 of us would be to work to locate the firms and do the research together. Because I'd be willing to work with the finance director to
Do you
do
want to be
that.
added to the list of people?
I could be added to the list of people, or it could be myself. And because this is specifically questioning where we're having a town administrator leave and our old finance director, then possibly people would prefer that if neither one of those people were on the process to research this petition. Not that I am accusing anybody of doing anything, but it sounds like this petition is concerned about 2 people leaving a position. And since I'm not going anywhere for a while, I'd be happy to do it.
That's fine. So I'll amend the motion, assuming that the Second Amendment agrees to have the chair of the town council work with the finance director.
I agree with that.
Did you get that, Wilfred? Okay.
No more.
All right, no more. We're done. So if there's no more discussion, Erica, could you call the roll, please?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye. And so if there is nothing else, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Point of order question, please.
Okay?
This will go then to the workshop on what date?
I don't have a calendar in front of me, but it's the 3rd Wednesday in December.
It can be adjusted in scope on that date, but it cannot be disapproved by the town council, is that correct? It has to go to a town council meeting to be officially voted on, is that a true statement?
That's January.
Unless we change our.
Generally.
Right. Yes, so it'll have to go to the,
The next town council meeting where this will be voted on is when?
is the first the first Wednesday in January.
Thank you.
It is possible that we have in the past voted. Mr.
We have
Chairman.
voted on, at the workshops.
The council can if, I mean, we try not to vote at the workshop because it's intended to be a workshop, but if the council feels that they can make the decision and it makes sense to, we can vote at a workshop on things. There's nothing prohibiting us legally.
I'd like to ask one point then. If we attend the workshop, will we be allowed to make any questions, ask any questions, since workshops are usually closed to public comment?
On the, at that point. We've also actually had public hearings at workshops because we've gotten backed up, so,
Understand?
yep.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion to adjourn. Oh, I have another hand.
One more point of order question.
Just a point of order, and maybe the secretary can clarify it, but did that motion ever get seconded
It did, it got seconded by Councilor Pulaski.
after all of the,
Right.
Yes.
all of the changes?
Yes.
All the dots and the i's are crossed.
Like that.
Administrator Dixon.
It has nothing to do with what was discussed tonight, but I would like to clarify, and I talked to you about that earlier. One very sensitive point to me reported recently that there was backroom negotiations in my departure. That's the furthest thing from the truth. Some two and a half years ago, I told the council I was done at age 60. 207, I would seek no further appointments. And I think, I don't know, Brian, are you the only one?
I was the chair.
You were the chair. So I did that to give everybody notice on the council that we would, work for a smooth transition. And since that point in time, we have got a large number of projects, and I am continuing to work on to secure the appropriate funding so that those projects will go successfully. But there were no backroom negotiations. I never met with the council. I just made the statement. And in fact, I have never met with the whole council on any of my salary negotiations or evaluations. They conduct them by themselves. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Just to add to that, the council does discuss the administrator's review and salary solely as the council, and then the chair does then have the conversation with the administrator about the review from the council and the salary. So that's the process. Is there anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? Erica, can you call the roll, please?
Aye.
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 Now I'm gonna go get that empty bowl of soup, see what I can scrounge out of it.
Thanks for bringing that over. It was nice.
I don't even know if I like this.
Paul.